The city of Nytherion hung above Kalar Prime like a crown of glass and light, suspended by ancient graviton spires that hummed with energy too old to be understood. From the edge of the capital's outer ring, High Counselor Damaris stood watching the pale blue surface of the planet below, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He could already see the smoke rising. They had come without warning. Ships blood-red and shaped like serrated blades tearing through the thin veil of orbit. The Crimson Verge, a name from old nightmares, stories told to frighten children and senators alike. No one believed they still existed. But now Nytherion burned. Inside the city's central chamber, the council had collapsed into chaos. Screens displayed firestorms blossoming across residential sectors, while defense drones fought and fell in swarms. Damaris moved swiftly through the shouting and panic until he reached the heart of the chamber. He pressed his palm to the beacon pedestal. The stone was cold. "This is not protocol," Chancellor Miros snapped, face pale and sweat slick. "The Accord hasn't been activated in over 1,000 years." "We are past protocol," Damaris said flatly. "We are being erased." He spoke the invocation in the old tongue, syllables that tasted like metal and dust. The beacon flared to life, emitting a soundless pulse that expanded through space and time. A call not for allies, but for something older, something forgotten. Outside, as the city quaked beneath another barrage, a thin shimmer appeared beyond Kalar's third moon. A rift opened in the black. From it emerged a ship, enormous and silent, shaped not with symmetry but with intention. The surface was obsidian dark, lined with veins of soft white light that moved like liquid. Nytherion's defense grid, already crippled, tried to lock onto the intruder, but the targeting systems went blind. The ship came to a halt above the burning city, unmoving. It did not answer hails. It simply opened. A single figure descended. No pod, no jet, just a person, cloaked in a flowing garment that glimmered like starlight. They floated downward until their boots touched the city's central plaza amidst rubble and blood. Citizens and soldiers alike froze. The figure stood tall, humanoid in shape, but somehow too still, too precise. "I am Vareth Kai," the being said, voice low but resonant, carrying without amplification. "I heard your call." No one moved. A young captain, helmet cracked and face bloodied, raised a weapon, hand shaking. Before the shot could be fired, the barrel bent in half with a sound like bones snapping underwater. "I come in answer, not in conquest," Vareth Kai said. "You are under siege. I can end it, but not without cost." They didn't wait for permission. A pulse of light erupted from Vareth Kai's body. In a fraction of a second, the attacking verge ships above the city simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. Gone. The sky turned quiet, except for the fading hum of energy dissipating. Later, in the council chambers, silence was thicker than fear. "This being," Miros said, voice cracking, "neutralized an entire fleet. Alone. And it answered our signal," Damaris murmured, trying to mask all with diplomacy, which means it was listening. They watched Vareth Kai through the observation wall. It stood in the plaza, unmoving, as if waiting. "We should not trust it," said Counselor Vale. "We don't know what it is." "Neither did the Verge," Damaris replied. "And now they're gone." That night, Nytherion did not sleep. Fires were extinguished, survivors accounted for, but the air remained thick with questions no one could answer. Among the rubble, a historian named Lyra Sen sifted through what remained of the old Temple of Origins. She had seen Vareth Kai in action with her own eyes. No weapons, no armor, just a being that bent reality like parchment. She found an inscription on a broken wall panel, dated to the Law Cycle. Her fingers trace the characters. "When the veil breaks and the stars bleed truth, the silent architect shall walk again." She glanced back at the plaza. Vareth Kai stood beneath a fractured statue of the Creator's hand, watching the stars. The next morning, the council formally invited Vareth Kai to address them. "You are not of this galaxy," Damaris said. It wasn't a question. "I was born in it," Vareth Kai said, "but not within it. My kind were cast into the rift between worlds, once protectors, now forgotten myths." "You were summoned?" Lyra asked. "I was waiting," Verith Kai said, not for a signal. For a moment, Lyra felt a chill that didn't come from the air. What do you want from us? Miroth asked. Verith Kai turned slowly, eyes glowing softly with unfathomable depths, only to keep the fracture sealed, the one beneath your feet. Damaris's breath caught. He remembered stories, old ones, about Kaler being built over something ancient, a convergence point. He'd always dismissed them. What happens if it opens? He asked. Verith Kai paused. The Verge did not come for your city. They came for what sleeps beneath it. They believe it can be harnessed. They are wrong. If it wakes, the galaxy does not burn. It unravels. A long silence followed. Outside, stars shimmer with indifference. So you've come to protect us? Lyra asked. I have come to delay the inevitable, Verith Kai said. How long that delay lasts depends on what you do next. Damaris looked around the room. Some counselors were pale, others skeptical. But something had changed. Not just the skies, not just their city. Something deeper. We'll work with you, he said carefully. Verith Kai inclined their head once, then let the countdown begin. From the shadows beyond the atmosphere, something stirred, something that had felt the beacon too. And unlike Verith Kai, it did not come to help. It came to feed, to be continued. Lyra's Sen moved through the lower vaults of Nitherian like a shadow among echoes. The city's surface still shimmered with aftershocks of the Verge's attack. But here, buried beneath foundations older than the city itself, she sought something older than even memory. The archivist had long since abandoned the catacombs, declaring them too unstable to be worth their secrets. But Lyra, historian and survivor, believed otherwise. She passed a mural, fractured by time and tremors, depicting beings with eyes like suns and limbs that trailed stardust. One stood apart, taller, cloaked, its head crowned by spirals of light. The inscription beneath was nearly worn smooth. She placed her hand on it, activating the transliteration grid she'd built into her glove. Glyphs danced across her visor. Silent architect, Riftborn, watcher of the folds. She stepped back, breath caught between awe and dread. It was him. Verith Kai had become a presence in the city, constant and calm. He neither ate nor slept, merely stood in contemplation, or moved with purpose toward places no one else dared enter. The populace viewed him with reverence, suspicion, and a growing unease. To some, he was their salvation. To others, a herald of more terrifying things to come. The council remained divided. Damaris advocated cooperation, believing Verith Kai's knowledge was their only hope against whatever the Crimson Verge had intended. Miroth and his allies saw the being as a foreign threat, cloaked in riddles. Tensions rose like storm tide, and still Verith Kai offered no allegiance, only warnings. Lyra emerged from the vaults just as the council summoned Verith Kai for questioning. She followed at a distance, watching as a tall figure entered the chamber without sound or ceremony. You've spoken of a fracture, Damaris began. What exactly lies beneath Kaler? Verith Kai's gaze swept the room, pausing on each person as though weighing their souls. The galaxy, he said, is a bubble of time wrapped around a wound. Beneath the city is a scar, a convergence point where reality thins. The Verge seek to pierce it. And what will happen if they succeed? Miroth asked, arms folded, his voice cold. They will awaken what sleeps, Verith Kai said, and it will not be merciful. It does not distinguish between guilty and innocent. It only consumes. Myritha's lip curled. More riddles, more theatrics. But Lyra stepped forward, holding a shard in the catacombs, its etched runes glowing faintly. He speaks the truth. This artifact predates every known civilization on Kaler Prime. It references the architect and a veil that bleeds light. This isn't new. It's ancient. It's real. Silence stretched. Damaris turned to Verith Kai. You've implied you're not alone, that you are part of something larger. Verith Kai nodded once. I am a remnant. My kind were born in the first ripple after creation. Guardians placed where space wore thin. When mortals reached too far, we held the edges. But the Verge, they were once like me. A ripple of shock moved through the room. They were created to observe. Instead, they learned to devour. The chamber fell quiet as everyone considered the implications. Then you know their tactics, Damara said. I know their hunger, Verithkai replied, and their desperation. Outside the chamber, across the black between stars, the Crimson Verge regrouped. General Raxus floated in zero-G at the center of his command vessel, surrounded by holographic feeds showing Nitherian survival. The silence from their lost fleet gnawed at him. Verithkai, he growled. So the architect lives. One of his lieutenants approached, skin riddled with circuitry, eyes flickering red. Shall we engage again, sir? Raxus turned slowly, his voice measured but laced with fury. No, not yet. We underestimated him, but we still hold the map to the core. He gestured to a display showing the city's underlayers, deep, molten zones where sensors failed and readings bent. He can protect the surface, but he cannot guard the root. We dig, and we let them think they've won. Back on Nitherian, Lyra found herself walking beside Verithkai as twilight fell over the city. He moved with uncanny stillness, his form casting no shadow. You said the rift would unravel everything, she said. Is there no way to seal it forever? Forever, Verithkai said, is a concept for mortals. For me, there's only delay. She stopped walking. Then why fight at all? Why answer the signal? He turned to her. Because even delay is mercy. Even resistance is meaning. The choice to defend, even briefly, is what separates creation from oblivion. They stood in silence, the sky above them smeared with auroras caused by damaged magnetic fields. Lyra realized she had begun to believe him, not because of the power he wielded, but the weight behind his words. Later that night, a tremor shook the lower districts. No alarm sounded. No ships approached. But Lyra knew. She could feel it. The Verge were not retreating. They were burrowing. The council convened in haste. Maps were pulled, seismic data reviewed. Underground scans showed anomalies forming below Sector 12, previously written off as geothermal distortions. But now, the readings formed patterns, circular, pulsing, deliberate. They found a way beneath our defenses, Damara said, voice tight with urgency. They're going for the fracture. Verithkai stood at the edge of the table, silent. Miros stepped forward. You said you could protect us. Why didn't you anticipate this? I am not omniscient, Verithkai replied. I am one voice in a choir long silenced. They are improvising, as must we. Damaris slammed his fist on the table. Then we act. We cut them off, send a strike team, and risk collapsing the structure? Lyra warned. We don't know what damage could awaken. They're already awakening it. Verithkai said quietly. Now you must decide what price you're willing to pay to stop them. No one spoke. It was not a question. It was a test. Damaris gave the order. A team was assembled, scientists, engineers, and a handful of elite operatives. Lyra volunteered. So did Kaldre, a pilot known for bending impossible flight paths and ignoring orders. He arrived at the launch bay in silence, strapping in with the casual defiance of a man used to survival. You sure you're ready for this? Lyra asked. Kale shrugged. I don't do ready. I do necessary. The transport descended into the dark, engines humming softly as they passed into layers of rock and steel older than history. At the heart of the descent, Lyra felt it. A pulse, like a heartbeat, slow, vast, and wrong. Above ground, Verithkai stood alone in the plaza, eyes closed, senses stretched far beyond the city. He felt the core stirring, and something else, watching. The Verge had not merely breached the defenses. They had made contact with the wound itself. And now, something ancient and ravenous was waking in response. Verithkai opened his eyes. The real battle was about to begin. The descent grew colder the deeper they went, despite the geothermal readings screaming otherwise. Lyra could feel it in her bones, a creeping chill not born of temperature, but a proximity to something not meant to be uncovered. The transport's lights flickered as it neared the lowest strata, casting ghost-like shadows across the faces of the crew. Kale sat at the controls, eyes flicking between instruments and the narrowing tunnel ahead. He didn't speak much, but when he did, It carried the weight of someone who danced on the edge of too many cliffs. "This place doesn't want us here," he muttered. "No," Lyra replied, strapping her harness tighter. "But that's exactly why we came." The team emerged into a cavern that defied physics. The rock had been melted, reshaped, but not by tools, by will. Massive concentric rings of metallic material spiraled inward toward a central dais, hovering slightly above the cavern floor. The air shimmered with distortion. Gravity itself seemed to bend around the structure. And standing at its heart, barely visible against the gloom, were Verge. Kale cursed under his breath. "They beat us." "No," Lyra whispered, narrowing her eyes. "They're not celebrating." The Verge soldier stood still, arrayed in a circle, arms outstretched, not in triumph, but in supplication. Above them, a translucent orb of light pulsed, suspended over the dais like a breathing star. Its glow deepened with each pulse, turning from blue to violet to something darker, something the eye wasn't meant to perceive. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, followed by the others. Sensors on their suits lit up with warning signals. Radiation, temporal displacement, even minute gravitational echoes. "They've triggered it," she said. "The fracture's responding." Kale raised his rifle instinctively. "Then we shut it down." Before anyone could react, the orb expanded suddenly. The Verge did not move. They screamed, not aloud, but through thought, through raw psychic agony that tore into Lyra's mind like knives of fire. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her head. The team staggered, some convulsing, others frozen mid-step. From the center of the orb, a figure began to emerge, not formed but formed from, as though the light itself was shaping a vessel. Vareth Kai arrived in a ripple of displaced air, his presence instantly stabilizing the chaos. He raised a hand, and the agony receded like a tide. Lyra gasped, struggling to her feet. "You're too late," she said, voice shaking. "No," Vareth Kai replied, walking slowly toward the dais. "I am just in time." The figure within the orb solidified, humanoid but broken, its limbs twisted at impossible angles, its face a mask of shifting eyes and mouths. It radiated presence, not sentience, not malice, but existence at a scale beyond comprehension. "It is the wound's echo," Vareth Kai said. "Not yet awake, but dreaming. And dreams of things like this reshape reality." The Verge, now shriveled husks, had offered themselves as vessels. Their minds were gone, but their final thoughts lingered in the ether. "Open it, become it, ascend. Can you stop it?" Lyra asked, voice a rasp. "I can bind again," Vareth Kai said, "but only with an anchor." He turned to face her. A soul with both memory and meaning. She staggered back. "You mean me?" "No," he said, eyes glowing faintly. "I mean choice. Yours. Or another's." Kale stepped forward, confusion giving way to understanding. "You can't do it alone. This being responds to resonance," Vareth Kai explained. "To purpose. It must be met with will forged in defiance." Kale looked at the orb, then at Lyra. "You can't ask her to." "I'm not," Vareth Kai said. "I'm asking neither. I'm offering." The orb pulsed again, louder now, a thrum that vibrated the rock and made vision blur. Time around them began to slow or speed. Lyra couldn't tell. The fracture was destabilizing. "I have to try," Lyra said suddenly. "All my life I've studied the past. Maybe this is why. Maybe knowing is what the wound fears." Kale grabbed her arm. "No way. There's got to be another way." "There isn't," she said. "If this thing fully manifests, it won't just tear Kaler apart. It'll rewrite physics, time, us." Vareth Kai stepped aside. The anchor must step forward freely. The bond will be permanent. Lyra walked toward the orb, heart hammering against her ribs. As she neared, it grew calmer, like a beast momentarily soothed. But then Kale pushed past her. "I'm no historian," he said, "but I've outrun death long enough. Time to give it a chase." "Kale, no," Lyra shouted. He turned and winked. "Tell my story right." Before she could stop him, he stepped into the light. The orb surged and contracted. Kale's form was absorbed, and with a flash like a collapsing sun, the cavern exploded with silence. When it cleared, the ore was gone. Kale was gone. The verge lay lifeless. Verith Kai stood still, head bowed. Lyra collapsed to her knees. Tears streaked her soot-covered cheeks. "He did it," she whispered. "He sealed it. For now," Verith Kai said gently. "The wound sleeps again. But Kale's spirit has become the key. He bought time, nothing more." She looked up at him. "How much time?" Verith Kai's expression did not change. "That will depend on the galaxy's memory and its choices." Above them, Nitherian sky cleared, but the stars no longer looked the same. The city honored Kale Dre with silence. No parades, no statues, just a night where every light dimmed for one full cycle, and people looked to the stars not in wonder, but in quiet gratitude. Lyra stood on the central spire of Nitherian, the highest accessible point in the city, watching the sky with a stillness she hadn't felt in years. In her hand was the data crystal Kale had carried everywhere, his personal log, his sketches, fragment of poems he never read aloud. It hummed faintly warm. "Time to give it a chase," he'd said. And he had. Verith Kai stood beside her, hands folded, his form less luminous now, as if some great burden had finally begun to lift, or perhaps merely shifted. "He changed something," Lyra said, her voice softer than the wind. "He became something," Verith Kai answered. "A tether between here and what lies beyond. The wound remembers him. It dreams of him now." Lyra turned, watching the being who had arrived from the stars. Once a stranger, now something else, an anchor in his own way. "What happens now?" "That depends on you," he replied. "The fracture is sealed, but the forces behind it are not vanquished. The verge will return, though slower, more cautious. Their godling is wounded. They do not forget." "And you?" she asked. "I remain. As long as the veil is thin, I am drawn to it. But not forever?" "Nothing is forever," he said, glancing upward. "Even we, the old watchers, must eventually sleep." The council reconvened days later, changed in ways none of them could yet name. Miroth was quieter, more measured. He had seen the cost of defiance born of fear, and it unsettled him. Damaris carried the weight of leadership not as a crown, but as a chain, one earned, not seized. Lyra stood before them now not as a scholar, but as someone who had touched the unseeable and returned. "We need a new division," she said. "Not soldiers, not historians. A synthesis. What do you propose?" Damaris asked. She glanced at Verith Kai, then back. "A watch." The room fell silent. "To stand at the boundaries," she continued, "to study the folds, the rifts, not to close them blindly, but to understand them, so we are never caught unprepared again." "You mean watchers like him?" Miroth said, nodding at Verith Kai. "No," Lyra said, "not like him. Like us, but taught by him." Verith Kai gave no protest. He only stepped forward, then removed a single crystal from the band that circled his forearm. He placed it on the table. It glowed with slow, pulsing light. "And this is the map of 12 fracture points across the galaxy," he said. "Each one is a potential rupture. Each one calls to those who hunger." Damaris exhaled slowly. 12. "Now you understand," Verith Kai said. "Kaler was not unique. Only first." The council approved the watch by unanimous vote. Lyra began assembling a team, diverse, sharp, drawn not by power but by purpose. She refused to recruit anyone who hadn't already lost something to the verge. They had to know what they were guarding. Weeks passed. Repairs in the city began to outpace destruction. Refugees returned. Children played again, though some still pointed at the sky and whispered about lights that weren't stars. Hope, like the fracture, remained fragile, but it lived. Lyra found herself drawn back to the vaults. She wandered deeper than before, seeking silence, or perhaps the echo of Kale's laughter. She carried his data crystal always, though she hadn't yet opened it. On the 40th day, she did. His voice, recorded days before the mission, filled the air softly. "If you're hearing this, then I'm probably dust. But that's fine. Lyra, if you're listening, Don't waste time mourning. I didn't jump into the light to die. I did it to stop running. All my life, I dodged consequence, commitment. But that day, in that moment, I knew there was no one else I trusted more to tell the story, and no one else I'd rather die for. She closed the recording before it finished, not because she couldn't bear it, but because it was enough. Outside the city, near the cliffs of Orin's Edge, a monument was placed. Not a statue, but a single beam of light projected upward each night, visible from orbit. It bore no name, only coordinates, and a message for the one who ran toward the wound. The watch expanded quickly. Ships were sent to chart the remaining rift points. Not all came back. Some reported anomalies, entire systems where time moved backwards, where languages wrote themselves midair, where dead worlds pulsed with inexplicable life. But the data came. The maps were redrawn. The story advanced. One night, Verith-Kai summoned Lyra. "I must leave," he said. "There are other places unraveling." "Will you return?" she asked. "If your memory is strong," he replied. She nodded. "Then we'll remember." He walked into the rift gate, newly stabilized, humming with soft golden light. As he vanished, the gate sealed behind him with a resonant thrum. Lyra stood there for a long time. The galaxy was wounded, yes, but it was also watching. And for the first time, it knew that when called for aid, someone would come. Someone would always come.